So I decided to go for a walk today. Hopefully you can hear me through this mask. It's just so, let's see if I can show you how hazy it is. It's just so smoky from the fires that it just makes sense to filter. I'm out here just kind of wandering around thinking about this, just stuff like I normally do. And I started to think about the systems that humans have created, or the engines of humanity, namely, society, economy, culture, the things that kind of define the human engines that have carried us through time. And, from an average person, your individual, impact in society seems so, I guess you would say, minuscule in comparison. And one that starts down at the bottom of society who thinks of, making it to the top. Maybe they want to just talk to the president one-to-one. Maybe they want to understand what the countries are doing in terms of human civilization. To get to those levels of humanity seems almost impossible. These levels of the greatest halls of humanity, right? Academia, the political, world leadership, central banking of some kind, the finance markets, maybe technology is a way to do it now. But there is still natural systems that totally will eclipse all of humans' engines and systems with just one snap, right? And in the past, it was harder to, maybe in the last 20 years ago, if you were to try to tell someone just how precarious life is, they might understand with the concept of an asteroid, right? And so we're like, yeah, the asteroid killed the dinosaurs could come at any time. So every average person, I would imagine, can at least consider that level of existentialism. But that's only one thing. That's a system of orbits of debris that there's no way for us to map all of it. Maybe someday, in the far future, if we can survive enough of these random events. So, for example, we have a huge system that our entire existence is owed to, namely the solar system. And that's the system of basically the entire influence of our main star to the rest of the system. And the thing about the sun is it's just a really powerful, not only does it emit, but it's a powerful magnet too. And it has a really complex magnetic field, multiple, if you will, that are constantly fluctuating for some reason that we still don't quite know. But there's a cycle every 11 years, like a clock you can tune your cosmological watch to. It changes from a minimum to a maximum. It turns on, or basically the volume turns up or down on the sun's electromagnetic energy output, if you will. So, I guess what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is the problems we're facing as a human species right now are not properly understood, nor is it a thing that we can all agree on. In fact, there's so many disagreements, so many points of separation of different ideologies and belief systems. And so one wonders is those systems that we are so scared of, the financial, the political, there's huge movements out there right now today that they've been around from all of human history, and as recent as, realistically 50 years ago in the US, we were at almost at a strikingly similar crossroads with something, that has been classified by trying to understand the origins of humanity as race. And it's like the origins of humanity being broken down into a race is so silly. There's so many variables and complexities with DNA and how it evolves over time. and how it continues, right? And the thing is about DNA is what we forget is there's huge periods of unrecorded time in between the births and the deaths. So there's time and space where the DNA is not actually continuing. It's birth and death. And then what happens is the information has to jump a massive bridge or gap to the next generation. The next generation has to not only incorporate that information, but build upon it as a foundation. And so evolution is so much more complex than I think than any one of us can truly comprehend. I think it's very multidimensional. I think when you start dealing with concepts at a quantum mechanical scale, I think that's when you can start to maybe get a better picture of these things. But even then, who knows? Because those sciences are still so far apart. They have to jump their own gap. So I guess now, after the roundabout tour of humans with their tiny problems, right, in comparison to the solar system, that system that can just go flash, and then here comes an M-class flare, the sun just blasting us with charged particles and just decimating our electromagnetic fields. In fact, probably snapping some of the Van Allen belts. And when those bad boys snap, the amount of energy release that goes into that center point of that Earth is unprecedented. Unprecedented. We'll just say, a Van Allen belt snapping can cause a lot of damage. And the other things, that we totally forget about is like the Earth is only possible because it has a massive magnet running it. And this magnet, just like any other magnet, if it moves around or if there's variables that are externally impacting it, it's gonna change over time, right? It's never perfectly constant. So our little magnet is having some issues right now. We're having hiccups. Is it tied to the sun? Who knows? Probably. Why can I say that? Well, because the sun is a massive magnet and every other planet is trapped, almost attracted to, by some force we call gravity, which is the curvature of space and time. So really it's not a force, it's just a description of space-time symmetry or geometry. And so something's attracting it. And I guess we could say, well, it's probably the electromagnetic field. Sun seems like a pretty powerful magnet. Anyway, I digress so much. But if I get back to the point, humanity is so lost right now, and I feel it. I feel lost. I mean, I look out here, and it's like, if I didn't tell you where I lived, you would never be able to guess. Which, once I say, will blow your mind. And it's because of the thing called change. So let me come this way. Still can't really make out any details. And I am in sunny California. So the thing is, we have a problem with perspective. Maybe scale is just so hard for us to rationalize into our day-to-day lives. And what's really interesting is it seems like there are massive movements designed to vie for that, I guess you would say, ability to, determine the important things. And it's like, who gets to ultimately decide what we, not as an individual, because we know who gets to decide that, but who gets to decide what we as a civilization or a species even, what gives the people the right to define a species? And I think the answer to that question is tricky and very opens a big box of accountability that I think, frankly, we've been running from as a species since the concept of sin was invented. We've been running from accountability, because the truth is, the only thing that can really impact an individual's mind in the end is still completely up to the individual. They have the ability to think, reason, and rationalize, And those are inherent gifts bestowed upon us from the past generations of life that we are able to, find objective truth and begin to create meaning. And that's why there's so much diversity in the human species over the years of evolution and anthropology. That you go back, you see the civilizations that first started and how their religions were basically the foundation for today's concepts of religion. And you can see this evolution, right, of this complex, all over the world, different branches of stories and meanings that have been mined. But if you start to map them all together, like some anthropologists and psychologists have done, you see that they're all describing similar rules. And the universe, from everything we've dove into over our generations, and I say we because we're a collective, but yet I'm an individual, but yet we share our time and space and our destiny together. So, this is a really complex world that we live in, and so complex that the paradox starts to emerge of infinity. And we know infinity exists in math, and it's like you find it all over the place, like everywhere. Every corner you turn, infinity's there. Hi, irrational number. Want to see where you end? And infinity's like, that's me. You're like, infinity, that means there is no end, aka paradox. Got it. Okay, so they exist. Paradoxes exist at a lot of spaces of thought, really. But that means that there is no clear way to be able to steer a system without being entangled into the larger scales of the systems and the smaller scales of the systems. And so this means that you as an individual are an emergent phenomenon of self, built out of a complex, connected community of individual information systems. You are a collection of life, and on their own exist in the wild. We have them with us, but they can't exist independently. We've seen it. We've seen cells that can survive on their own. And yet we are a collection of these things. So if you really want to boil down to it, it's like you can entangle yourself into what every astrophysicist and every famous scientist has ever loved to say since, oh gosh, what's his name? He did the book, is it not Asimov? Sagan. So he did a really, so he said something, he said, we're made of the stars, we're stardust essentially. We're all made out of the same thing. And every scientist in the future has kind of parroted this thing. So I'm sure people said it before too. I mean, if you go to Eastern philosophy, they start talking about the unimagined or the unknown information that exists out there, the unmanifested. They probably knew about that stuff before, but anyway, it's like you have the potential to essentially measure the entire system because you are a part of the entire system. You are an emergent phenomenon from the system. Therefore, you are your inertial reference point, the point with which you are measured, fits into a larger frame of universe. That's where, in my opinion, physics meets quantum mechanics. That's where those scales merge and intersect, is through us, through life. And that is complex and hard to unwrap on its own, but really the point is you could be a part of any system on this earth, and you have the ability to choose that. You can identify with any system, from the scale of the quarks that you are made out of to the scale of the cosmos with you emerged from. So, what scale and what system will you identify yourself with? And I find myself not being able to find a system built, with the mechanics of mankind or humanity. Women and men, right? They're humanity. It's one thing. They just express different ways. And it's like, which one am I choosing to be a part of and contribute to? And if I choose a large system that seems undefinable, can I even make a difference? Can you even contribute? Because of the vast scale and relative, size to you seems profoundly paradoxical. like it doesn't make any sense. And yet it is an objective truth. It is mined from the fundamentals that we find in physics, right? These rules that just emerge. Light travels the same anywhere in the universe. That's how we can measure distance so accurately. And that's how we find black holes, because they warp that light, changing, its course or creating a wave, let's say. And so lensing occurs, right? And if you're still on after this, I know it's a lot, and I think we don't give ourselves enough time to consider things that are of the paradoxical nature these days, because we're so I think we're being distracted. I don't know if it's intentional, but I think it's probably self-motivated, really. We all want to be distracted, now that I think about it. And so I think we're being distracted by ourselves through our algorithms, of which we've allowed to access every part of our life and every piece of our data. And it's just now it seems like there's no room in your brain anymore for personal space, personal, adulterated space that we all had as children, I think, and we call it imagination, right? And you're like, "Wow, that kid's got a wild imagination." Well, it's probably because he takes some time inside of his little space to build out these places, these imaginary worlds. And as you grow up, we all feel it. You feel like at some point you look back and you can't remember when you had an imagination as vivid. And it seems to sneak up on you so quickly that you don't have time to properly mourn the loss of that imagination. And before you know it, you're somewhere you couldn't even predict it. You would have never guessed that you would repeat a similar path. Repeat the similar path that's been repeated before you, generation after generation. The same emotions. And it's why the hero's journey is still used to this day, because it's the same story of psychological evolution that we've been having for the last couple hundred years. And we're getting new stuff now, but it's very convoluted and it's very hard to decipher. It's like, what is the new human consciousness supposed to be? Knowing everything we know in the past, is it possible? Is it possible to establish models that can now sustain the pressures of reality across more amounts of time without sacrificing independence? Because it seems like the whole message of the universe, in my opinion, if you can boil it down to one, it would be the Schrodinger wave equation. Like, that's the closest you can get to boiling a universe down to a formula. And it's a wave function, right? And it's like that wave. Oh, this is tough to explain. I even forgot where I was going with that. That was so complex that I even bamboozled myself. Oh, the message of the universe. That's right. Okay. So we want to measure the position of an electron. We want the wave function at a given time and moment in space. We say, hey, we measure time and space at our scales, aka we know everything. So we might as well measure and predict and measure and see if we're right where this electron is going to be. And the answer of the universe is this. It goes similar to this tune. If you are watching two people gamble on an event that seems random, let's say rolling a dice and having to guess the number that it's going to be. Let's say you're rolling on that kind of chance. Or let's say there's two roosters. One looks bigger, but they're going to fight. And there are people gambling money on this. Here's what the universe says. You watch it, you see who's placing the bets. You see who wins, and you know what's funny is before the bets are finalized, you know in your head, you're like, I think this one's gonna win, and I bet it is, but I'm not gonna gamble, but I bet if I gambled I'd win, right? So then you watch as your prediction comes true. And what that does is it builds a bias. So the universe is like, it's like building you up. Like, you got this. And then you predict another one. And let's say out of just sheer dumb luck, you predict a third one. And now you've realized in your tiny human brain that there is some pattern here. Something you're doing or observing is allowing you to predict a winner. So you get confident. You've cracked the code. And then you bet. And then the opposite happens. So then you try a reverse bet. No. It was a fluke. That's right. It was a fluke. So you bet again because now you still know that's the one's going to win. It loses. Okay, so now you're on to something. You think the universe is trying to skirt you a little bit. So you say, all right, I got you, universe. You can play that game. I'm going to vote for the one that I know will lose against my pick. I'll put the money on the opposite of my choice. And then the universe answers. And it's not the choice you wanted. And it's like measuring the position of an electron is a lot like that. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but it seems like that's about what it is, right? I'm just kidding. Obviously, that's super sarcastic and funny. But the position of an electron behaves differently based on what's happening to it. If it is being observed, and this doesn't have to be a conscious observer, because it could be just the concept of passing through a phase change, if you will. Even if a detector who's not conscious tries to detect it, it changes the behavior of the measurement. And so out of that, we have now parallel universes, quantum inertial gravity, quantum loop gravity, string theory, you name it. It's because there is no answer, is I think what the universe continues to try to tell us, and is like the core message of the universe itself. There is no one answer. It seems to be that there are collections of answers that have a scale of weight. We would call that metaphorically gravity. And so that means realistically, in my opinion, that you are directly entangled into that level. And if that's the truth, well, then you can do something. And it's like, it means you can live truthful if you want, and it means you can seek the things that have been mythologized. What do you call it? Mythologized. That might not be a word, but it is today. You know, it's like these ideas that you can just be loving. Like, you can do it. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like, and we have these stories, these parables from history, all through every civilization, of stories of heroes and triumph over tremendous evil, and it's always these forces that are fighting each other, but we don't classify them as evil, right? Sometimes you just say this force and that force, and when there's an imbalance between them, bad shit happens. And it seems to be true that at every scale of measurable universe, there seems to be rules and balances. Yet, as human species, why aren't we taught this? Why aren't we told that there are rules and balances built into the very fabric of the universe itself? Into the very fibers, vibrating tiny strings, if you will. Folded up in 24 dimensions. Let's say we don't have anyone to talk about those strings that vibrate. We don't know that there's rules in the, like, what do you think will happen given the scale at which the human species expands? Like, what's the population right now on the Earth? Is it sustainable? I think Mother Earth has some answers, and it looks probably a lot like worse than what I'm seeing today in terms of the environment. But what if we weren't so afraid of paradoxes? What if you realize that if you are an individual and you are emergent from this universe, then you are energetically entangled to the entire universe. And what does that mean? Well, it means that one affects the other. And it's across time and space. It doesn't matter. We'll just say across time because it's one flat circle. It's like we should be allowed to learn these things and to be able to think these things. And I think the more, it is terrifying. It's terrifying, the vastness of infinity. But it's like, but then you're a part of the energy. Like, you're part of it. It means you're directly a part of it. Like, I don't think humans believe that. I really don't. I don't think there's a lot of humans that you could find and that you could ask for proof in where they've impacted the reality that they exist in. For good, let's say. Let's say, show me the net positive interactions you've had with the universe. And that will be the new way we determine wealth. It's like, yeah, I have all these incredible experiences, and you can, if you want, you can look them up in the archives of the memory there. Go have at it, guys. And they're like, wow, this man is rich. Like, my goodness. He's not afraid someone will steal him. He must have a whole bunch of them. But anyway, that would be cool. But it's not reality. In reality, it's like, it's based on this, right? Like, hey, I fit on this little piece. How much of this stuff that I'm standing on can I own? Yes. I bet a whole bunches. Let me try to get all of this within sight. Oh, you know what? Now there's new satellite cameras. Let me get everything within satellite sight. I just think that would be best, And then politics comes along, subconsciously programmed by the universe, right? I think we all are, kind of, right? We all have influences happening at a below conscious level, meaning we are not aware of all the influences that we're impacted by. Like right now, who knows what I'm standing under wires, right? Technically, I should be getting whole types of things going on here in terms of exposure, which I think, I think we've been exposed to frequencies a lot. So it's like, okay, well, the sun is also, I'm exposed to that thing right there. That seems like it's pretty powerful. So I seem to be doing okay. In fact, the sun seems to be almost medicinal at times, but too much of it, my goodness. What a fine balance that is, huh? Yeah, I just think there's more balances out there. I think we need to not be afraid of them, and the biggest part is when you were a kid, they often say, well, you don't have fears of consequences. And it's like, well, it does seem like the universe wants that to be a big lesson because, how many people have these stories of near-death experiences as children, or these crazy injuries or freak accidents that they survived through, all because of, at the time, they didn't really have a sense of consequence. But now they can really marinate on the fact that their consequences are real to their choices. And it seems like the message again from the universe is like, hey, if you don't measure the consequences and you're not entangled to the consequences, then you have no bias, meaning you not interact with it, but you can become a part of the system without changing it, right? It's like you don't have to take from it by measuring or whatever. It's like you can just be a part of it, and you can contribute to the generation of it. I don't know, whatever the whole universe is doing, creating some kind of crazy energy. Yeah, so this has been stuff that I've been thinking about that I wanted to get out there. I don't know if it's going to be heard or if anyone will take the time, but I think you should. Anyone that listens to this, I think you should try. Like, genuinely, just give it a shot. Try to see, measure, like, and do a thought experiment, if you will. Like, what does it mean that you share the accountability of the entire system? Like, what does that mean? If you are directly a part of the system and you contribute to it and are accountable to it, what would that mean for you? And it's like, there's some scary truths that we run from. And I say we because I do it too. And it's like, it's just a part of being human, I guess. The scary stuff we try to avoid. There's nothing scarier than the unknown. And, that's what death is, really. It's just unknown. But it seems to still be important to evolution, right? I mean, somehow the information's jumping gaps. And we say, well, not somehow, because we can actually measure it. It's just language. It's like, oh, so language is the physical manifestation of DNA. Uh-oh. So that's pretty important. We should probably learn that stuff. And what is quantum mechanics? Well, it seems to be a language of the universe spoken through mathematical concepts, or concepts that can be represented in math. So it's safe to say that if it can be represented in math, then, well, you can probably use language to get a pretty close approximation, because you're using language to define it, aka quantum mechanics, the language of the universe, aka by whatever. God. Signed God. P.S. Check out the sequel. It's like, what does that mean? Another universe? Great. Yeah, that's, I guess, what I wanted to say. And I guess I'm done saying it. So, thank you if you listened. I'd love to hear comments, questions you might have, maybe clarifications, because I ramble. But I can clarify everything I spoke about. So I would love to clear up anything if anyone has any questions. So, bye.